Okay, back with more set review. Um, for Theros Beyond Death, still doing limited. Um, okay, let's just hop into blue. Illyrios is a 3 mana 2/3 that enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap if you have a reflection. When it enters the battlefield, you make a 3/2 reflection. So it's a 3 mana 3/2 that dies into a 2/3, more or less. That seems quite good for limited. It's just like a 2-for-1. Neither of the two is like particularly great, but they're both fine. This looks like a B minus. Ashiok's Erasure, 4 mana counterspell. Basically, it's an enchantment that stops your opponent from casting. This is just really bad, right? They can get rid of this and get their card back. It's a 4 mana counterspell, and the not being able to cast cards with the same name just isn't going to come up much. This is like an F. This has got to be an F. I guess maybe it's like a D minus. Maybe you just are really, really hurting for a counterspell. At some point you bring it in out of the board. I just think it's like an F. Brine Giant, 7 mana 5/6, but it costs 1 less for each enchantment you control. I think it's still likely to often be like a 5 mana 5/6 or a 6 mana 5/6, but that honestly might be good. Good enough. It's probably not great. But it's enough to make me think this is like a C, C minus maybe. You do have to do a little work, but even with one enchantment, 6 mana 5/6 is okay. 5 mana 5/6 is good, but not like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write home about this. Especially because you're probably not getting turn 5 even. Maybe you can get a turn 5. You're almost never going to be able to get this on turn 4. Right? You need to have like 1, 2, and 3 drop enchantments. Yeah, that's not going to happen. And a 5/6 on turn 5, you would need to have 2 enchantments and 5 lands already, which is asking for a lot. I think this is going to be like a C minus. Okay, Calafe. Yeah, it's at least a 2/3 because its power is equal to your devotion to blue, and it has 2 pips. And creatures and enchantments, it's just a slight tax to be able to target this stuff, which is pretty good. Often this is going to be a 3/3 by the time it attacks at least, and it can get to be a 4/3 or a 5/3 by later in the game. This card seems pretty good to me, a little better than the white one, I think, but not tons better. I'm going to give this a B minus. Probably still just a C plus. Chain to Memory. Target creature gets -4/-0 until end of turn. Scry 2. I don't think I like this. It can trigger pseudo heroic stuff, I guess. That doesn't really seem worth it because you don't want to trigger your own creatures. Scry 2 is nice, but you really want to be able to win a combat with this, which means that their creature was going to kill yours. They were going to trade, and now they don't. Otherwise, it's like gain 4 life Scry 2, which is not the worst thing ever, but it's pretty bad. I think this is like a D plus. You don't really want to play this, but it's not the most embarrassing card ever. Deny the Divine, 3 mana counter spell that exiles. This is like a. I mean, I don't know how good counter spells are going to be in this format, but it can counter a creature or enchantment. It's only 1 blue instead of double blue like most like cancels are, but I tend to not really like counter spells in limited that much, especially if they cost more than 2. Obviously, the 2 mana ones are almost always conditional, but this one's even a little bit conditional. I think I'm going to give this one a D plus as well, but it could come in. Now, Eidolon of Philosophy, this one's a real interesting card. 1 mana 1/2, which is not good enough, but you can pay 7 and sacrifice it to draw 3 cards, which be nice. If the format is slow enough to be able to do this, this card could actually be good. If the format is fast, then if there's X ones, this could be okay, maybe. You could bring it in on the sideboard, especially if you like that it's an enchantment. But in general, I don't like it that much. I mean, I think the format might be slow enough that you can get away with this. I kind of like this card. Drawing 3 cards is really good. You can also, if it is that late in the game, they're attacking you with a big thing. They're attacking with a 5/5. You have your 7 mana. You can block and then sacrifice this. and that gives you a little bit of extra time because you can do this at instant speed. All in all, I can't think it's great, but I'm going to give it a C minus. It could be very unplayable if the format's too aggressive, or it could be very good if the format's incredibly slow. It's a little bit hard to know. Yeah, Elite Instructor, 3 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you loot. I'm not as big a fan of looting as some other people, and I think 3 mana 2/2 is just too bad. I'm going to give this a D. Yeah, D. Glimpse of Freedom, 2 mana draw card, and then if you have 5 other cards in your graveyard, you can pay 2 and a blue to cast this again, exiling those to draw another card. I think it's going to be a little bit hard to get that many cards in your graveyard that reliably. You probably can do this, escape this once over the course of the game, but also not if you want your graveyard to be doing other stuff, really. I think this card's not great. I think it's like a C, maybe a C minus. I just don't know how easy it's going to be to stock your graveyard. And if it is easy, whether you want to have other payoffs that you'd rather use, for escape fodder mostly, as opposed to this. Because that's going to be an issue as well. Like, your first escape card is a lot better than your second escape card, your third escape card. They're just diminishing returns because you can only escape things so many times. Ichthyomorphosis, you turn something into a fish, it turns into a fish it's an 0/1. Yeah, these tend to not be great effects, but 0/1 is a little bit better than the ones we've seen that have turned it into a 1/1s. 3 mana is a little bit worse, though. This is probably like a D+. There are a lot of creatures with abilities. There aren't a lot of big creatures, though, and it isn't a true removal spell. It's only mostly a removal spell. Curiobus the Sea Guard, 7 mana. You immediately get an 8/8 Kraken with Hexproof. Then you get to tap all their non-land stuff, and that doesn't untap during their next untap step. And then you get to gain control of something. This is great if you can resolve it and not immediately die. And an 8/8 helps you not immediately die. If you get all 3 chapters off, it's a 1 for the creature and a really good 1 for the creature, and then a 2-for-1 for gaining control of a permanent an opponent controls. So that's a 3-for-1 that also has this big tempo chapter 2. This card looks very good to me if you can resolve it. The question is just, can you resolve it? And I think you can either play slow enough, or the format will be slow enough that even though it's 7 mana, you can probably live long enough to resolve this. I think this is like an A, maybe an A minus because it's 7 mana. I don't think it's as good as that white rare that we saw at first, because that's only 4 mana. This does more, obviously, although I guess that one does a lot if you play enchantments. But this is very good. That card probably should have been an A plus in white. Anyway, Metamize Prophecy, 2 mana. You scry 2. You choose a card name. The third turn, whenever you cast a spell with the chosen name, the first time this turn you draw 2 cards. So this is like a scry 2 draw 2 that's a bit delayed. The look at the top card of each player's library does not seem super valuable to me. But, it has a little bit of devotion application. It has a little bit of enchantment constellation application. Can be removed by enchantment removal. But 2 mana for scry 2, draw 2. You do have to work a little bit to be able to do the draw 2, but I think you should usually be able to find a card that you're going to be able to cast your next turn. I think this card is pretty good, not amazing. Gotta give it a C+. Memory Drain, it's like we said about counters earlier. Scry 2 really does not make me want to play a 4 mana counter. I think this is mostly a sideboard card if your opponent has a great bomb that's also expensive, like a Curiobus the Sea God, maybe. You could maybe bring it in, but mostly you don't want to play this. It's like a D-, and you can occasionally bring it into the sideboard. Now this card, Nadir Kraken, 3 mana 2/3. whenever you draw a card, you can pay 1 to put a 1/1 counter on this and make a 1/1 token. This card is very good. You're just going to pay 1 like every time, and even if you just do it for your draw step every turn, you're going to get a huge creature that also makes a bunch of little creatures that you can like jump with or eventually make a really wide army with. And it only costs 1 mana a turn. This card is excellent. This is an A. Still probably worse than that Pegasus, but this is very close to an A+. I think I'm just going to give it an A, but it does die probably to a lot of the removal, but I mean, it's very good. It's very, very good. Naiad of Hidden Coves. As long as it's not your turn, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. I know that this is a bit of a theme for blue, but we haven't seen that many instance or flash cards that we really want to play yet, right? I mean, this is nice. The counter spells we don't really want to play, and you're not really playing them ahead of curve, so you can keep a little extra mana up. I know that playing on your opponent's turn is a theme of blue, and obviously this is some value, and the body isn't that bad to start with. But it's just doesn't excite me that much. I think I'm still going to give it a C-. 4 mana, 2/5 enchantment creature. D+? Maybe just a D. I don't know, the stats don't excite me. Omen of the Sea, 2 mana flash, so that does help with the casting stuff on your opponent's turn theme. And then it's Scry 2 draw card, so it's preordained. And then you can sacrifice it later for Scry. This seems pretty good to me given that there's the enchantment bonuses, there's flash here. You can flash for Constellation, you can flash for playing your cards on your opponent's turn. The effect for 2 mana is maybe a little bit more expensive than you'd like, but you can eventually get a lot of scry out of this. Helps for devotion. I think all around it's pretty solid card, but not great. It's a C, I think. One with the Stars basically turns a creature into an enchantment that loses all its other card types. You could cast this on your own creature if its ability is just super important to you and you want it to dodge creature removal. On the other hand, there's enough enchantment removal in this set that I don't like that so much. I think you're mostly casting this on your opponent's creature to make it not be a creature anymore. So obviously if it's not a creature, it can't attack or block. So it's like an expensive pacifism that, well, like pacifism, it doesn't remove the other abilities. It's like an expensive pacifism mostly. So what does that make this? Expensive pacifism is still okay. This can be removed like pacifism can because people are going to be playing enchantment removal. It's got to be like a C+. Probably a C+. Blue doesn't get much good removal, and this is fine. Protean Thaumaturge, 2 mana, 1/1, and then whenever a enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you can clone another creature on the battlefield. You have to work for your clone here, but I think you can probably get it off a lot of the time. It is only 2 mana. You can potentially clone better things as the game goes on more. This card seems fine, but not super exciting. We'll give it a C+, I think. 2 mana, 0/5 Defender with Flash. It's like a D+. The Flash doesn't do that much for you except for this opponent's turn theme, I think. Sage of Mysteries, 1 mana, 0/2 with Constellation. Whenever an enchantment comes in, you get to mill target player for 2. So if you're running Escape, you might want to do that. If you're trying to mill your opponent out, I would not be very happy about that in this set where it doesn't look like there's a ton of Escape, but there is some, and so you're just helping your opponent with that. Having said all that, I don't think the payoffs, you don't have enough Escape, payoffs aren't that big, and you have to jump through enough hoops. I don't think playing a 1 mana 0/2 is very good. I don't like this card much at all. I think it's like a D. Sea God Scorn. Return up to 3 target creatures and or enchantments to their owner's hand. It's a sorcery. If it were an instant, obviously you'd like it better, right? You could play around removal, you could do stuff. There was a very similar card in the original Theros, and that card was very good, Sea God's Revenge. But this card, well, this card can get enchantments, not just creatures. You lose the Scry. But I think the set is less set up for this effect than the original Theros block was. The original Theros block, you mostly had big creatures that you invested a lot into via Monstrosity, via Bestow, via Heroic. You don't have any of that here. So it's more like a normal set, I think, which is going to make this a lot worse than Sea God's Revenge was. Just the huge tempo swing you got from removing counters and Bestow and Monstrosity and Heroic counters in the original Theros was a big part of why this was good. Also, your opponent probably didn't have as many creatures. Also, just like the tempo swing, because you would have big creatures that you'd then be able to get in, was huge. Especially because there were a lot of mana sinks, and not much of that is true in this set. So I think probably this card is a lot worse than Sea God's Revenge. It's still probably playable, but these effects have recently tended to disappoint, I think. So I'm going to be fairly low on this and give it a C minus. It is a lot of tempo, though. Shimmerwing Chimera. 4 mana, 3/2 flyer. I'm in. Beginning of your upkeep, return up to one target and other and target enchantment you control to its owner's hand. That it's up to one is a big advantage. You can replay. Well, you could replay like creatures that have been locked down. You could replay, enchantment creatures that have been locked down. You could take this back to put it on a better creature. I think there isn't that much that we've seen that you really want to replay so far, but there is some stuff, right? Mostly Omen of the Sea looks like the best thing so far, but a 4 mana 3/2 flyer is already good, is the thing, right? So I'm going to call this a C+. If you can go off with like the Omen, any of the Omens, because there's one in each color, then that's really good. And you can probably build around this a little bit to be able to get one or two of those Omens. And the 4 mana 3/2 flyer is already good. I'm going to give this a C+. Shoal Kraken, 5 mana 3/5 that for Constellation you get to loot. I am higher on 3/5s than most people, but I'm lower on looting. I think this card is okay, but not great. I'm going to give it a C minus. Sleep of the Dead. Tap target creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, and you can escape this. So this is quite a bit of tempo if you're in a tempo deck, and you get to recast it every few turns if you get your graveyard stocked enough. That you only have to escape 3 other cards, exile 3 other cards, means you might be able to cast this like 3 times in a game, which might be enough tempo to more or less be a removal spell, but might not. You have to recast it every time for it to kind of be a removal spell. Yeah, I don't really think this is very good. Too resource intensive, and mostly it's just that it's not a big enough effect. If it were an instant, I'd be a lot higher on it, because tapping down your creature during your opponent's turn and then it doesn't untap during their next untap is a lot better than doing this at sorcery speed. As it is, I'm going to give it a D. Starlit Mantle, Flash Aura, enchants a creature you control. It gives that creature +1/+1, and when it enters the battlefield, hexproof. So this is mostly a way to protect your own creature. You can maybe use it as a combat trick. It works okay with that Chimera we saw, but not great, because especially after the first time, your opponent's going to know that you have this in hand. The +1/+1 is just not big enough for me to be excited about this, but it can't be that bad. It goes up, obviously, if you have things you want to protect even more, but I still give it only a D+. Stern Dismissal. Return target creature or enchantment an opponent controls to its owner's hand. Only 1 mana for bounce like this. I think bounce, again, is not going to be as good as it was in the original Theros block, but 1 mana bounce spell is still pretty good, I think. Even in most sets, that's just... Compared to Unsummon, you can't save your own thing with this, but you do get to hit their enchantments, which is not nothing. I think this is going to be C minus, maybe a C. It's just cheap enough to be pretty reasonable, and I guess it works a little bit with Escape. Maybe it's just a C. Stinging Lionfish, 2 mana, 2/1. When you recast your first spell during your opponent's turn, you can tap or untap target permanent. Well, your opponent's going to kind of see this coming, so it's not like you're going to be able to ambush by untapping something very much, I guess. Although late in the game, they might not have much choice. Yeah, mostly it's probably going to be tapping something down, which is not a huge value, but it does give you some amount of tempo. I think the big thing is that a 2 mana 2/1 enchantment creature is already okay. So this is like a C. I don't think the ability is good enough to make it a C plus, but it's like a C. You also only got to do it once each opponent's turn, so that's worth noting. Sweet Oblivion, 2 mana to mill for, and you can escape it. So this card might be able to mill your opponent out totally. You could be a little bit worried about their escape. And again, if you're trying to escape yourself, it's probably only like you can only do it 2 or 3 times in a game. So I'm a little bit suspect of your ability to do that to your opponent. However, if you're just trying to mill yourself, then it fuels itself and you can mill your whole deck, which is not very good usually. But if you have another really good card with escape, maybe you can do it. Or if you have Thassa's Oracle here, maybe you can do it. But you would kind of already need Thassa's Oracle. You need to not mill the Thassa's Oracle. So, and it's a rare to build around. I think this is like a D plus. Maybe you can build around it, but I'm kind of skeptical. Thassa, 4 mana, 6/5. You need Devotion, just like all of the other Theros gods. For it to be a creature, 5 Devotion to the color. And at the beginning of your end step, you get to blink something. I don't think we've seen that many great ETB effects, but it at least gives something vigilance, basically, which is okay. And you've got this 4 mana to tap another target creature ability, which is reasonable. I think you mostly want this to be turned on, though. Again, I'm going to say B+. If there is a really good ETB effect, obviously it goes up. Otherwise, I'm not super high on it. I mean, it's still very good, because if you can get it turned on, it's great. But really don't know how to evaluate very well how easy it's going to be to get 5 Devotion to a single color. I think it's going to be pretty late in the game most times before you get that. I don't know what the removal exactly is like. But if the removal is removing Devotion also, yeah, I don't know. Okay, Thassa's Intervention. Yeah, this card looks good, right? You can play X blue blue to look at the top X cards and draw up to 2 of them and put the rest on bottom. So 4 mana draw 2, or 5 mana draw 2 with a little selection, 6 mana draw 2 with a little selection. That card is okay, but not great. But like Inspiration is fine. And then a counter spell, which can probably counter something because it's twice X. So 3 mana, they would only need to pay 2, but obviously you can tell whether they can pay that or not. 4 mana, they need to pay 4. 5 mana, they need to pay 6. Even by the time they get to 4, you're probably countering their spell. 6, you're almost certainly they're not going to have that much, especially if it's an important spell that you would actually want to counter more than drawing cards. So once this gets to 4 mana, being a split card between counterspell and draw 2 is pretty good. Having said that, it's not great because you can never draw more than 2. You get a lot of selection, but you're never drawing more than 2. In slow games that grind out a lot, this card should be quite good. So I expect in sealed it's going to be pretty good because the counterspell is better and also the draw 2 with selection is better. In draft, it's probably only okay. So in draft, I'd give it like a C+, but in sealed, I'd give it a B- to even a B maybe. Thassa's Oracle, 2 mana 1/3 that you get a look at X cards where from your top of your deck, where X is your devotion to blue. You put up to 1 on top and the rest on bottom in a random order. It's kind of like Scry X. It's a little bit worse than that. So it's like, let's say you play this on turn 2, you haven't played anything else. 2 mana kind of scry 2 for a 1/3. That card is fine. Omen Speaker was pretty good. It's a little bit worse than Omen Speaker in that case. Can be better than Omen Speaker if you have more devotion. Although you can only put one thing on top, so it's never that much better, right? Because scry, you can never scry multiple things to the top. That looks like a C to me. And then it has this win the game text if you're almost milled out or have a ton of devotion, which hardly improves this. It obviously does improve it. It's just like free upside. But I don't think you're winning the game off this that much. So I'm still only like C. Maybe it's a C plus if the body is relevant, but I think it's mostly a C. Thirst for Meaning. 3 mana, draw 3, discard 2, or discard an enchantment. This card seems real good. As it's an instant, if you're only discarding an enchantment, it's like you played a divination at instant speed with a little bit of selection. You had to discard an enchantment. If it's draw 3, discard 2, that's still a lot of filtering on top of your cantrip. And that it's an instant helps with this playing in your opponent's turn theme. I think this is like a C+. Obviously going to be a little bit dependent on how many enchantments you have, but also like the speed of the format. If you don't have time for this, it can be bad, but it's probably most formats you can find time for 3 mana, especially instant speed. Makes it a little better. Threnody Slinger. 2 mana, 1/3 flash flying. Well, I like this a lot better than the 1/2 flying we saw earlier. Flash is also good. And it can be a little bit of a combat trick because it can give something -X/-O, or X is your devotion to blue until end of turn. Yeah, I mean, 2 mana, 1/3 flyer is okay with flash, is playable in most formats, I think. And then this effect you might even be able to get a little bit of a 2-for-1 out of, or you're just saving some life probably. Yeah, this card looks good, but not fantastic. C. Maybe it inches up to a C+. So next we go to Thrix the Sudden Storm. 5 mana, 4/5 flash flying. Spells with CMC 5 or greater that you cast cost 1 less to cast and can't be countered. This card is excellent. This is an easy A. 5 mana, 4/5 flying is already probably an A. With flash is definitely an A because you can probably eat something with this. And then making your other expensive stuff cheaper. I still don't think you want to play too much other expensive stuff. So it's like only a small bonus. But also making it uncounterable is, again, only a small bonus really. But just the 5 mana, 4/5 flash flying and the other stuff's upside. This is definitely an A. Maybe even, no, I think I'm going to go A+. It's competing with that first 3/4 flying Pegasus from white as the best 2 cards we've seen in the set so far, I think. Let's move on to Towering Wave Mystic. 2 mana, 2/1. You get to mill as much damage as this hits a creature, a player for. So you probably again are milling yourself with Escape. Although between this and Sweet Oblivion and what was this, O2, there might be a mill deck here. I think you really need the games to be pretty drawn out enough though still, because none of these look fantastic. Triton Wave Rider. 4 mana, 3/3 that whenever an enchantment enters under your control, it gets flying until end of turn. 4 mana, 3/3 is a little bit lackluster, but if you can make this fly a reasonable amount of the time, 4 mana, 3/3 flyer is quite good. Yeah, this is probably like a C. I don't know how often you can trigger this is the thing, and it can't block flyers very often, almost surely. Yeah, 3 mana, 2/2 flash flying, super solid C. Windrake is usually around a C. Giving it flash helps a little bit, but not a ton. Okay, Wave Break Hippocamp. 3 mana, 2/2. Not good, but whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, draw a card. That's very good. We haven't seen actually as much of this theme as I was expecting, It's on this rare, and it's on this uncommon, which was not a great payoff. And I think it was on one other card. Whenever. So this instant, or this playing on the opponent's turn theme, is not much of a theme. Is it just those two? Well, then it shouldn't really be oh no, here we go. Stuff is cheaper on your turn too. So it's those three. It's the common, the uncommon, and the rare. Um, this one is the only one that seems super exciting to build around. This one is super exciting to build around. You get to draw extra cards every time you're playing an instant on your opponent's turn or a flash thing. Um, yeah, this is definitely a card you can build around. It seems very good. You're likely to draw a couple extra cards. It is a bit fragile. Dies to all creature removal and all enchantment removal, and only 2 toughness means probably really all creature removal. But the upside is so high. I think this got to be like a B minus, maybe a B. When you can really go off with it, it's going to feel great. Whirlwind Denial. It's pretty hard to imagine this not just being counter target spell, unless its controller plays 4 in limited. Because when are they going to have multiple spells or abilities on the stack? I guess if they're trying to play a thing you countered, they counter back, and then you can play this. But how often do you get in counter wars like that in limited? Almost never. So basically, this is like another counter spell, and I think it's a little bit worse than either. The other 2 3-mana counters we've seen, which you can probably get a copy of anyway, so this is like a D, D minus. And then we finally have 5 mana 3/4 flying that you can pay a bunch of mana to scry one. Well, 5 mana 3/4 flying is fine. That its enchantment creature is, again, I think a small upside probably. That you get to play with pay 4 to scry one is a small upside. I mean, at some point you can end up empty-handed or flooded in a decent number of limited games, and this card is very good in that it's a flyer there if there's a board style. But even if you have to hold it back to block with, you can still scry towards things. This is a C, maybe even a C plus, but probably just a C. That does it for blue. We'll see you again soon with black.